Merlin, network magic, a full Kubernetes service. Hey everybody, my name is John Capobianco. Thanks for joining me. Let's go to the whiteboard real quick, but real quick at a high level, I want to take something that I'm running at the CLI, a PyATS job. This is a Python network automation infrastructure as code. Then instead of running the CLI, I'd like to move it into a Docker container image. And then, because I have so many of these Docker container images, I want to move them into Kubernetes to help me manage and orchestrate and run them as a complete set of microservices that's actually all handled and run and orchestrated under the scenes. It's actually very simple. It's a lot of fun. So again, let's take a quick look. With PyATS, I am doing learn and parse. I can't get my lid off. Oh no. I'm doing, learn and parse, like learn BGP or learn OSPF as a function, or parse, show IP interface brief. Against the Nexus 9K in the sandbox, this returns JavaScript object notation to me that I then I create 5 files with. 2 files are just raw JSON and raw YAML. And then 3 files go through a Jinja 2 template where we render in Python. We use the .render function to call Jinja 2 to create a CSV file, a markdown file, and an HTML file that I've circled and we'll come back to. Business-ready documents of these learned and parsed functions. Well, that all has to run inside of a Python environment, which has to run inside of a Linux host. So we're sort of limiting. It's not a very democratic solution, right? You have to know some Linux, you have to know some Python, you have to know the PyATS framework. Well, instead, can I package it up as a CD-ROM, a Docker container, where we can just use the Docker run command, or even in Docker desktop, click a button and run it? Yes, we can, and we have. And we've explored this a little bit, but what I've done is move this around a little bit. I now create a base image, and the base image has the PyATS, the Apache, all of the libraries, the SSH client, everything we need. And then per function, I have another image, another tag that is just a small subset that calls the base image, and the base image calls Ubuntu. So we're able to make layers in these CD-ROMs, these images that we're creating. Now, these are all going to run in a container as images in Docker, and we can explore that in the Docker desktop. Remember, we can use volumes to mount this Docker container to our host, either our Ubuntu host or directly to our Windows desktop. Now finally, because I'm going to have 10 or 15 or 25, I don't know, a lot of these images, these CD-ROMs, these tags, can I load them into a Kubernetes cluster as a deployment with a service as a pod? All right, and it's the pod is this image in Kubernetes speak. And what you've seen here is using cron job, can I gracefully reset the pod at an interval? And this HTML page, can I present it as like a home page for that service with links to the full artifacts, the CSV and the markdown and the JSON, as well as a RESTful API that we can expose? That's our high-level goal. And let's walk through some of it step by step. Now, I'm in the process of converting this from my working CLI commands into Docker container images. So let's just use, again, we'll pick one here. We're going to have the learned ACL. Let's just do that one because it's alphabetically first. And you can see I have my base image, which is a little under 2 gigs, that I don't need to run. I'm not running this, but it's packaged up and it's ready locally for me to call from to build further. So if we look at the base image Docker file, This is the base image that's from Ubuntu. It's non-interactive front end. We're updating Ubuntu. We're installing Python 3, pip for Python 3, OpenSSH client, the full PyATS, and we're fixing up a library. And then we're installing Apache 2 and copying in our style sheet. Go ahead and expose port 80 for whatever this container is. Now then, learned ACL is a very small subset where I call that base image, and then I copy in everything locally that is related to this particular function, which is my Jinja2 template, my testbed file, my Python code, a little shell script that I'm going to run as the command so that I can run multiple commands in the container, and then the output of my PyATS job, my Merlin job, and that style sheet, I'm going to move it into the home directory. Now let's quickly look at this shell file, and it looks like this, learned ACL, where I'm running at the CLI, the PyATS run job command, and it happens to be my learned ACL job, with the testbed file. Once that's done, copy in the resulting files directly into the web server root, and then start Apache in the foreground. So in theory, what we should have is an exposed web server with the results of learned ACL. So now in my Docker Compose file, where I package up, and I want to use Docker Compose build and up, we'll start with build, and then we'll bring it up. And what I use is my image. I want to give it this tag, sourced from that Docker file we were looking at, and expose port 8081 to port 80 inside of the container. Now that will build it locally. I also have set up a automated build in my Docker Hub that looks at my pull requests and will trigger a build in the cloud, so I don't have to upload it. Now, I'm not going to do that until I've actually confirmed that each one of these local files builds properly and spins up and gives me the right output and everything. So there's a little QA I want to do locally. And I'm not going to make you watch me spin up all of these. I'll spin up a couple of them and validate them, and then I'll time lapse forward to translate the Docker Compose into Kubernetes manifest. Now, before we go too far ahead, what I thought I would do in both the Docker environment and the Kubernetes environment is build a little home page, a little index.html that I'm going to move in. And this is my, instead of remembering all these ports and names and links, I can just reference port 8080 and then get to them from there. So let's build the little home page first. And I've called it Docker homepage to differentiate it from Kubernetes homepage because they're slightly different. So I'm going to give this a tag of Docker homepage. And let me make sure I don't have a homepage. I don't think so. All right, so I don't. So let's build. I'm going to say Docker Compose. Let me clear the screen here. Docker Compose build Docker homepage. And let me show you what we're building before we go too far. So I have this homepage Docker file, and all it is Apache, and I'm copying in my style sheet and my index, and then I'm starting Apache in the foreground. If you're going to do this, make sure you add this Debian front end non-interactive as an argument. Otherwise, you'll have to deal with localization questions like North America or Pacific, or right. That makes it non-interactive. It'll just spin up the Apache. So let's go ahead and try this, and we're going to build it. And this might take a minute. If this is going to download a full thing, what I will do is pause the video and come back, because it may take a few minutes, and I don't want you to sit here watching it pull Ubuntu. No, okay, so it's good. All right, so now let's bring it up, and we're going to just say Docker up Docker Compose up rather. Now it should be up, and if I go to localhost 8080, here's my home page now. Good. Now at the bottom, I'm going to show you, I don't have any of these up, but once I do learn to ACL, let's try learn to ACL next, now that I have a home page running. So I don't want to stop my home page. I'm just going to start, here, let me do it this way. Let me just stop that. And then what I'll do is once it's not in use here, I can start it up. Well, I'd rather it start under Merlin like that. Let me just do that, and I'll start a new Ubuntu. I don't think closing Ubuntu is going to hurt anything either, but I'll just leave that running for now. So I'm going to go into my Merlin underscore Docker folder, and let's bring up the ACL. So we're going to say Docker Compose, and we're just going to build it first. Learned ACL. And it's going to build, and now it's built here in the background. I could just click run here, but let's add it to the existing container by just bringing it up, and we're going to watch it connect. So this is PyATS doing its thing. It's making its SSH connection through my VPN, learning ACL, transforming it into those files, and starting the web server. So now in theory, if I click on here, I'm going to open a new tab. There is learned ACL as an HTML page. And I actually have the raw JSON. Right, so this, what you're looking at right here, is the results of device.learn ACL. This is what PyATS is giving us. And everything else you see subsequently. Now let's look at it as YAML. So that's that as a YAML dictionary. And it will let me download the CSV file, which I'm going to open in VS Code. To show you what it looks like better, right? So now I have it at my fingertips in VS Code here, and I can sort by, show me any access list with no access control entries, right? Or show me everything, but show me the permission of accept, right? Or I can do whatever I want. Show me ACLs without logging. Anything we want in a CSV file locally through a little portal like this. And then there's the markdown file as well. Now, the other thing I'll point out is that I can come into Postman now, and let me get this JSON link, and I can go in and get the JSON. And actually, I can go to, right, there's the JavaScript in Postman. Or if I just go to the 8081 in Postman, it will be the HTML page, where I can get the subsequent links from the bottom of the HTML page and follow them in Postman as well, if I prefer. Right, so I don't know if clicking it follows the link. I think it does. Right, from Postman. Even the CSV file. Where did that go? Oh, I've lost it. But I'll show you what the CSV, even the CSV file works. If we go to the bottom here and follow the link to the CSV file and do the send, we have it as CSV. It's just incredible, just incredible. So then, right, it's going to be each one of these links is going to work and take us to that information. So that's what I'll be working on, is doing the Docker build, Docker Compose build, make sure it builds a healthy image, Docker Compose up, make sure it parses the information and gives me the web page and that all the links are good through each of those commands in the Docker world. Once that's all good, and I'll show you what the final result is, we're going to move it all into a Kubernetes cluster. All right, so I'm going to keep working on these images. Don't go anywhere. Okay, so this isn't actually too bad. I've made my way through. I thought I would just check in and do some examples here as we go. So in the Docker Compose file, I've made my way down to inventory. So all of the learned functions are done, as well as a few of the show commands. And here and there, I'm hitting little snags. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of copy and paste and a lot of replace. So I'm not saying that these are all going to work perfectly, but let's just go through the process here. So I'm going to clear my screen, and what I like to do is build it with no cache. That's important because I don't want to get tripped up and be running from an older version, a cached image. It's very important in your development that you're not running from a cache copy. The other thing, yeah, there's a few. Let's get rid of these. There's a couple of, make sure you're cleaning up your images as you go. And I see inventory is in use here. So before I build it, I'm going to flush it out of my container. So let's just go through this here. Where's inventory, and get rid of that, because my previous build had a, and now I'm going to flush it out. And I don't want to leave any orphan builds behind. So let's build it with no cache. And it builds no problem. Now let's try to bring it up. So it's going to be Docker Compose, right? Our first thing is build no cache, and then the tag in our Docker Compose. Everything is built successfully, and now I have this new image called, Merlin tag inventory. So we'll try to bring it up, and fingers crossed. So Unicon is going to connect to the device, handle the SSH connection. PyATS is going to do its incredible work of parsing the show inventory command. Merlin is going to run it through the Jinja templates and do all of the rest of the Python. And yeah, okay, so there was some red text there and that crashed. I've ironed that out. Let's just take a look here. That was just a simple copy paste mistake. So again, let's build it up with no cache. So Docker Compose build no cache inventory. It's going to build that image, and then we're going to bring it up with the up command, and hopefully it's not going to make me look too silly this time, and it's going to run to completion. So again, Unicon connects, PyATS parses that show inventory command, stores the files, brings up Apache. Now I can head in here, and there's my inventory. Great. And there's the JSON and the CSV and Markdown file. Yeah, everything looks nice and pretty now, right? So I can go back to my home page and go look at inventory, and there's my inventory. Wonderful. So again, I have, half a dozen, maybe more commands here to finish. I just thought I would check in and show you one, and even it had a little mistake. But that's fine. That's what I'm trying to iron out, and that's why I'm bringing them up, building them one at a time. Build it, bring it up, test it, check all my links, check next command. So I'm working my way through Docker. We'll get to Kubernetes real soon. Stick around. Okay, so I'm back, and I have everything completed, everything built. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you I'm not cheating in any way. And I'm actually making a repo out of this, and we'll look at the README file. These are my builds in the cloud happening, so I'm making these available publicly. You can see that they're all pending here. So once these builds are all finished, all of these images will be available. And in my, if I go to container apps, there's no Merlin running. It's just a bunch of Kubernetes services, and none of my Merlin are in use. Now I'm not going to build them, but I am going to use Docker Compose, and this is pretty neat. So I do Docker Compose, and I'm just going to say up. And it's creating all of these Docker images based on their tag. And now they're all firing up and doing their connections and gathering their information at scale, every command. And I'm just going to let this go. It doesn't take much time at all. So all those commands, everything that we're doing, all that parsing, all that file creation, bringing up Apache services, now they're all just sitting here, and it's done. It's finished. So they're all in use now. And if we go to my container apps, down here we'll see Merlin's running. And it's only orange because my base image here, my base image isn't something that actually runs. I could maybe comment that out of my Docker run, or if let me just remove that image. This should turn green now. Right, so now it's a completely healthy service. Every one of those containers is running. And now I just have to visit, localhost 8080, and I can hop around all of my services here, right? My whole state of this device in nice little HTML pages. Nobody's using the CLI, nobody's logging in. It's all just there available. We can use Postman. You've seen that. So that is the Docker service, and I can restart these at will. And this is when Kubernetes comes in, right? So this leads me to the Kubernetes. What if, well, now that I have 20 or so containers, is there a better way than me managing them all one by one inside of my container in Docker Desktop? Also, that's a point-in-time snapshot, unless I'm restarting them manually in Docker, which is pretty nice. I'm not diminishing that in any way. That's wicked, really wicked. But can I now add some sort of cron job and say, okay, every minute go ahead and run those commands and refresh your state? That's where Kubernetes comes in. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to make my conversions over to Kubernetes. I have an entirely new repo for Kubernetes. So at the end of this, there's going to be a new Merlin Docker repo and a Merlin Kubernetes repo. All this will be available to you. All right, thanks again. I'm going to get the Kubernetes going. Okay, we are ready to start the Kubernetes transformation. We've seen and we've tested and we've built all of our individual containers. We're good to go. I'm going to point out some slight differences, and we're going to start from the home page, and then we'll move from there. So that's what I have staged and ready to go. So you'll find that everything is exactly the same as the Docker folder, except there's a couple of new files here. So from our Docker Compose, our home page looks like this in the Docker world, where we have our image, our Docker file, and our ports. Well, and I'm going to show you this, we have to transform that into Docker manifests. So one is the deployment, and you can see that it mentions compose convert. We're going to come back to that. I use a utility actually to convert the Docker Compose into these two files, and then I make some slight adjustments from there. Well, down here we can see the spec, and the container image is referenced here. It gives it a name, and it has the ports, the container port of 80. Now the service that goes along with the deployment, I've added these two lines that I had to figure out from the internet's help. Kubernetes, the control plane allocates ports from the range of 30,000 to 32,767. And I have to set this up as a node port. Now there's different types of ports, but I want to, what I found during my development was that I had to turn on, after I had built these without this node port, I had to do port forwarding to enable the web page to be interacted with from localhost. Well, that's what this is doing, is turning it into a node port and exposing, in my case for the home page, port 30,000. Now to bring these in, it's similar to the Docker Compose commands or the Docker commands, except now we're using the kube control commands, and we're going to say apply F, and I'm going to just copy these so I don't get them wrong, and we put them in comma separated. So I already got that wrong, you see. Copy that in and paste it. Yeah. Whoops, sorry. And then comma, and I'm just going to paste it in again and replace that with service from deployment to save me the copy paste. All right, so that's our command. Kube apply. Now, this happens very fast. There's not a lot going on here. Just right away, the deployment.apps Kubernetes homepage was created and the service was created. All right, now, before we just jump to the service, I know we're excited to see it. I'm sure that it's up in the background. Let's just explore the Kubernetes and what we have here, right? So we're going to say kube control, and I like to just tab it, get, and let's get our deployment. Okay, so we have a deployment. It's up to date, it's available, and it's 94 seconds old. So now let's get the service. Whoops. Let's get the service. And we should see the service. Now, we have our main Kubernetes cluster IP, and then our home page. And as you can see here, we're exposing that 30,000 service right here. against this Kubernetes IP address. Now, let's look at pods. And there is our pod, our homepage pod. And it is running. It hasn't restarted at all, and it's 2 minutes old. Now, I think we can get some details somehow, but I don't want to fumble around too much. But we can get more information about these. For now, let's just confirm that the service is up. So let's go to localhost 30,000, and it's up. And to make sure that it's not cached or anything, let's hop over to another browser. And it is up, and my zoom is out to show you this. So this is our home page now. And now we're going to populate and bring up all of these other services as Kubernetes deployments and services. Before we go anywhere else, though, let's look at this in a few different places. In our Docker desktop, we can see now that Merlin, my Merlin Kubernetes homepage, is actually in use. And if we go to the containers in here, if I go to homepage, I think, we can see that we have the pod homepage and we have our Kubernetes homepage. Now, if I were to go to the CLI or restart this, effectively I'd be restarting the Apache server. Pretty neat stuff. Now let's hop over into VS Code. Now I think I don't want to get into these. Somewhere there's a link that says sometimes it'll say look at this in VS Code. Anyhow, let's hop into VS Code and go to our Kubernetes extension, and let me collapse everything and refresh. So we have our Docker desktop cluster, which has these namespaces, which has these nodes, our Docker desktop node, and now look, there is our Kubernetes homepage node, and it's running, and there's the IP address it has. And then all the other internal nodes that make up the Kubernetes cluster. In workloads, we can see we have our deployment here, and it's healthy and green. And we have, we don't have any cron jobs. We'll come back to that. And we have our pod here. Now I can, do a lot of different things here. Forward it to a different port. I could delete it to make it refresh and spin up a new version of that pod. Lots of different things to interact with it. And if I click on it, it is the YAML file. A lot more in-depth YAML, but it's still just YAML. Pretty neat stuff, right? So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and do that kube control apply F for all of my remaining services, bring them all up, and then I'll come back to you once that home page is taking us to live pages and hyperlinks. So stick around, this isn't going to take me too long. Okay, so I got ahead of myself. I actually wanted to show you the conversion. All right. I'm just so excited by all this new technology, and it's a little overwhelming, and I'm really doing my best to try to make this consumable and hopefully a little entertaining. So let's look at compose. All right, so that's what we're going to do is check this out. I don't have it ready to go, but we're going to look up Kubernetes compose, Kubernetes with a K, compose. And don't worry about the GitHub repo. Go to this translated Dockerfile article, and it shows you how you can install it, right? You're going to curl a repo, and then you're basically all set. You just say compose convert, and it'll detect, and what you're going to see is it's going to create the service and the deployment for us. And then we do our kube apply F, and we just chain them all together to bring them all up. So let's try this, and I want to highlight that we have to add a step between our convert and our apply. We have to massage each of these services that are created to make them the appropriate node type with a port that is forwarded. All right, but other than that, this should just be a matter of saying compose, convert, and here we go. All right, so now it has created all of these files, and we can see them in my VS Code now. And now I'm going to delete the base image because there's nothing related to it, but everything else is going to stay in this repo so that you at home can just do the kube apply command, which I'll put into the GitHub repo. Now, let's just bring in one of these. Let's not go too far, right? So I have all of these now. Let's just bring in, like here's VLAN deployment. That's a good one. Let's do that. So let's do cube control, apply F, and we're going to just copy in vrf deployment.yaml, and then copy and paste it again and make it service. This is live. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to get those, and now if I do my cube control get deployment, I should have a VRF deployment. That looks good. So far, so good. Let's get the service. And, oh no, I jumped too far ahead. Right, see here, I didn't do the port forwarding. Right, and you probably said, John, you just said it. You have to update them before you bring them in. So that's okay. Here, let me show you how we have to remove that to clean it out of here. So we're going to do cube control delete deployment VRF and service VRF. But now that I have those, let's jump into those files. I guess they're the last interfaces. So let me quickly check which port in my HTML page I assign that, so I get that right at least. And it's, what are we looking at here? Show VRF? Yeah, just show VRF. So 30,022. All right, and then let's look at our home page. Split this again, and I need the home page, Kubernetes home page, just to see. Did it overwrite them? Yeah, it did. It overwrote my home pages, so I have to fix those two now. Well, that's unfortunate. I did not see that coming. I thought it would have made duplicate files. That's okay. I have some stashed. I have them stashed. I've prepared for this moment. Let's just go find a service. And what I need is this type node port and then the node port. So let's bring in type node port, and let's put it back into home page for sure. So type node port, and then I'm going to keep the comment. So under target port, put that back, and this is 30,000 for home page. So let me save that. Okay, and then here we're going to do the same thing under the VRF. It's a node port, and it has the node port of 3022. And let's save. All right. And is my home page still up and running? Yeah, it is. Let's rebuild that home page just to be safe, because I did overwrite it and I want to make sure that I haven't made a mistake there. So we're going to delete service. Let's find out what the name is first. Get deployment. And we're going to delete deployment Kubernetes homepage, delete service Kubernetes homepage, and now let's bring them up. And let's just check them out here. Well, it's still terminating one of them, but the other one's running. Is it up? Looks okay. All right, so let's bring up that VRF one now. And I should have that cached in my command history here somewhere. Here we are. Okay, apply a VRF deployment, VRF service. And let's get our pods. So VRF is running as a pod for 3 seconds, 10 seconds. That should be enough to have the data. So now let's try show VRF. And there it is. There it is as a Kubernetes microservice. Pretty neat. So I hope I didn't go too fast. And I know there's a little bit of moving around. I know I've made a couple mistakes. Hopefully you're learning from my mistakes. It's the only reason why I can keep them in here. I could clip all this stuff out, but I don't see the point in that. I'm learning, I'm making mistakes, and that's fine. So what's next? I'm not going to keep you here as I cube apply all the rest of them, but that's what I'm going to do is apply F and bring in all my deployments and services. And then I'll come back to you and we'll talk about what the next final step is. Stay tuned. I hope you're enjoying this. All right, this is getting pretty exciting. I'm going to share my screen and show you what I've done here. Now, you can bring them all up in one shot like I've done here, or you can bring them up in pairs, whatever you like. But I have created all of those microservices now. And if I go into my VS Code and I go to my nodes and my Docker desktop, look at all these nodes, and they're all up and healthy and running. And they all have different IP addresses, and everything's hunky-dory. And if I go into deployments here, these are all my deployments that line up with my show commands and my learn functions. Now let me refresh this. I think there's some more. Yeah, version, VRF, VLANs, and then all the different pods. And if we go to our web page, localhost 30,000, all of these are now live links, and they all take us to the different information. Pretty neat stuff. So what's next? Well, what was the whole point of this? The whole point of this is that, say, show IP interface brief. Here's what it looks like now. Here, let's just do this live. Let me launch PuTTY, and I'll show you what's next, and it's pretty neat. So let me launch PuTTY and log into this 9K. And I think it's just admin Cisco 123, and let's just add a loop back. It's conft int loop back 100, IP address 10.10.10.100.255.255.255.0, no shut. Now, how can I get this in the background to pick up that change without anybody doing anything? I just come here and get the latest state, or let's say up to the minute state. Well, that's where we're going to have this idea of a cron job. And you can see here under our deployments, or under our workloads rather, we don't have any cron jobs defined. And in the repository, there's a file here called cron job, and it has a schedule of every minute. Go ahead and run kube control from the bitnami kube control image and run the following commands: kube control, rollout, restart, deployment, and then our list of deployments that we want to recycle, which I will put in here. So that will just run, and I could run this kube control restart command at the CLI. Now I didn't have this built up yet. So let me just pause it real quick. I'll fill out that list of pods we want to recycle, and then we'll bring this into our cluster. Okay, I've got this working. I've got this figured out. Took a little bit of tweaking, but let's check it out. So again, what our whole goal is here is that I can add this loopback 100, which I have here, and that this web page will just pick it up and show the new config. So I've loaded in, and I've done this differently. Instead of comma separating all of them, I've just done them as an individual clean reset for each deployment. So instead of hammering every single pod to restart them all at once, I'll at least stagger them here in order. So now let's load this in, and if we look at my cron jobs here, there are no cron jobs. So and here's our pods that are all running, and just keep a note of the time here, how long they've all been running. They've all been running for at least 2 minutes now. So now let's use our kube control apply F, and it's cron job dot YAML. That's going to take a while to kick in here, but we're just going to do that, and then what we're going to do is get our pods and get our cron jobs. And here, if I refresh this, there'll be a new cron job in here, and eventually we'll see a pod spin up, the restart pod, on a minute interval. As you can see, we've got to wait another 40 seconds here or so, and we'll keep an eye on the pods as well. So keep an eye on that pod timer, and we're trying to make this up to the minute, network state information. And we could tune that. That could be less or more. But for now, let's leave it at a minute. Okay, so in theory, it's already run. There's our last schedule was 12 seconds ago, and the next schedule coming. It's creating the container now. And then we should see the other pods reacting, meaning they should be terminated, and then they'll spin up again with the graceful restart, and this age timer will reset. So this is happening pretty soon, I believe, as the deployment restart is running right now and restarting all of these pods. It's going to make a liar out of me, isn't it? Let's just be patient. And okay, yeah, no, look here. All the old pods are starting to come down. The restart command is starting to cascade through the commands, and our pods are all refreshing here, which we should see at the CLI as well. See, yeah, Terminator creating. Lots of stuff is happening here. And now if I refresh my page, there's my loopback 100, right? So let's, to prove I'm not cheating in any way, let's, do conf t no int loopback 100, and let's do int loopback 200, IP address 10.10.20 200. Let's do that, and then we'll do something else as well, and no shut it, and then let's just do show int status. Sure, let's do this. Conf t eth11 description John was here. Here. Alright, so we've removed loopback 100, we've added a description to an interface, we've added loopback 200. Now, I don't know how long this is going to take. In a couple minutes, though, if we go to our home page, right? So if we go to, weird. I have to update my hyperlinks are all broken. Well, that's why we QA. This service list takes us to the wrong 8080. I thought I fixed that. I'll have to recompile that. Well, that's okay. Let's see if we can get this loopback 200 to change, and then we will just find the interface status. So interface status. Oh, I don't put the description, do I? Oh, that's unfortunate. We're not going to see that description. I guess if I went to the config, learn config, we might see the description here. Yeah, look there. Ha! Look at this. John was here in the running config in the JSON under that interface config. Pretty neat. And then I bet you there's a loopback 200 now. Yeah, there's loopback 200. There's no loopback 100. If I refresh this page, 200 has changed, or 100 has changed to 200, and the IP's changed. Pretty remarkable. Pretty remarkable. So again, right, we started with this idea of, can we use something like PyETS to go learn JSON and then turn it into CSV files? We moved up through Docker, and now we're in a fully autonomous, up-to-the-minute, self-maintaining Kubernetes cluster with microservices. I want to thank you if you made it all the way to the end of the video. Reach out to me on Twitter, reach out to me on LinkedIn, reach out to me here on a YouTube comment. Let's get it going. Let me help you start this at home. The README file is going to be very explicit on how to do this. Clone the repo, follow the instructions, and spin up a DevNet sandbox. And you too can build Kubernetes micro CLI services. Thanks again. Stay safe.